Dawn arrived slowly in Oakland, bringing with it that familiar smell of damp earth mixed with burnt plastic that Lily had known since she could remember. At 9 years old, she had already learned that the world was made of discarded things, of leftovers that other people no longer wanted, and that her life depended on finding value in what everyone considered trash. The landfill stretched out like a ghost town under the weak light of the street lamps, with mountains of plastic bags swaying in the cold morning breeze. Lily stretched inside her makeshift shelter, made of torn tarps and pieces of wood she had collected over the months. It was her home, small and crooked, but it was hers. She knew she needed to hurry. The best materials always appeared in the by early morning when the trucks dumped their loads, and there wasn't much competition from other waste pickers yet. Her cart, inherited from Mr. Joe, an older waste picker who had passed away a few months ago, was her most precious tool. The front wheel made an annoying noise, but it still worked. Lily rolled up the hole-filled blanket she used to keep warm and left her shelter. The air was freezing, and she pulled her torn shirt up higher, trying to protect herself from the cold. Her bare feet stepped on the damp ground, avoiding the glass shards that glittered among the debris. That's when she saw the blue tarp. It was half hidden among torn garbage bags, in a part of the landfill that Lily rarely explored. There was something different about that corner, something that caught her attention. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just a child's curiosity, but she approached slowly, pushing her cart carefully. At first, she thought it was just another pile of rubble. But when she got closer, she realized that the blue tarp covered something larger, something that shouldn't be there. With the courage that only children have, Lily lifted one edge of the tarp and looked underneath. Her heart raced when she saw the man. He was lying on his side, breathing weakly, wearing a suit that, even torn and dirty, seemed to have been expensive once. His leather shoes, though muddy, were different from anything Lily had seen around there. And there was something about his face, even pale and bruised, that didn't match that place. Lily backed away a little, her heart beating fast. She picked up a piece of broomstick that was nearby and poked the man's arm, as if she were inspecting an unknown animal. When he didn't react, she moved closer, observing the subtle movement of his chest rising and falling. He was alive, but barely. The girl looked around, checking if there was anyone nearby. The landfill was silent, just the sound of the wind, hitting the tarps and the distant noise of cars on the highway. She knew she had to be careful. Strangers in the landfill weren't always good news. But there was something about that man that intrigued her. Maybe it was the way his hands were, carefully folded, or the way his hair, even disheveled, seemed to have been well groomed. There was a ring on his finger, simple but slightly shining when the street lamp flickered. Lily knelt beside him and carefully checked if he had serious injuries. There was no blood, but he seemed very weak, as if he hadn't eaten for days. She lightly touched his forehead and felt that he didn't have a fever. That's when she decided to do something that even she couldn't explain later. Instead of searching his pockets, instead of trying to take the ring that could be worth something, Lily stood up and ran back to her shelter. She returned carrying her hole-filled blanket, the same one she used to keep warm on cold nights. Without thinking twice, she covered the man with it, adjusting the edges so he would stay warm. Then she sat down beside him, hugging her knees, and stayed there, watching over him. The hours passed slowly. Lily didn't know why she was doing this, why she hadn't simply walked away. But something inside her, a voice she couldn't explain, said that this man needed help. And she, even though just a child, knew what it was like to need help. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky orange above the mountains of trash, the man slowly opened his eyes. At first he seemed confused, looking around as if he couldn't understand where he was. His eyes met Lily's, and she saw in them a mixture of fear and gratitude. He tried to sit up but fell back dizzy. Lily moved closer and pointed to an old can that she had filled with rainwater the night before. He drank slowly, as if he were relearning the taste of water. For long minutes they looked at each other in silence. Lily didn't know what to say, and he seemed to be trying to remember something important. There was an expression on his face that she couldn't decipher, as if he were searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he managed to whisper a single word. "Thank you." Lily smiled, and it was a genuine smile, the kind she rarely had reason to give. At that moment, she didn't know that she was about to embark on a journey that would change her life forever. She didn't know that this man carried secrets that could transform not only her world, but the world of many other people. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone, and that for a 9-year-old girl living in a landfill was more valuable than any treasure she could find among the debris. The man closed his eyes again, but this time his face seemed more peaceful. Lily settled beside him, determined to protect this stranger that fate had placed in her path. She didn't know that he was Edward Miller, one of the most important businessmen in San Francisco, and that his appearance in that landfill would trigger a series of events that would change their lives forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from, we'll continue. The following days passed like a strange dance between two souls who had met in the most unlikely place in the world. Edward, as Lily had decided to call him after finding a wet business card in his pocket, remained under the blue tarp, still too weak to move much. Lily established a routine. She would wake up before sunrise, as she always did, but now her first steps were toward the corner where Edward was resting. She brought water in a clean plastic bottle she had found, and small pieces of food she managed to collect during the day. On the second day, she found a discarded takeout container that still had some grains of rice stuck to the bottom. She spent time carefully scraping each grain, mixing it with a little water to form a paste that Edward could swallow. When she offered the mixture, he looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of surprise and contained emotion. "You don't have to," he whispered, but his hands trembled as he received the food. "Everyone needs to eat," Lily responded simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Edward began to observe the girl during the day. He saw how she worked with determination, separating materials with a precision that would surprise any adult. Plastics on one side, cardboard on the other, metals in a separate pile. Her small hands moved efficiently, and she knew the value of each item she found. "Why do you do this?" he asked one afternoon when she returned with a full cart. Lily stopped organizing the materials and looked at him. "Because this is how I live. It's always been this way." "And your family?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lily lowered her eyes and continued separating the plastic bottles. "I don't have a family. I only have this." Edward felt a tightness in his chest. For the first time since he had awakened in that place, a clear memory crossed his mind. The image of a large house with a well-maintained garden and a table full of food. But the image came accompanied by a feeling of emptiness that he couldn't explain. On the third day, Edward tried to stand up for the first time. His legs trembled and he staggered, leaning on a pile of cardboard. Lily immediately ran to help him, offering her thin shoulder as support. "Slowly," she said with a wisdom that didn't match her age. "You're still weak." Edward was surprised by the strength that this small girl had. She helped him sit in a more comfortable position, arranging some pieces of cardboard as a backrest. That's when he noticed her cart, especially the front wheel. That made an annoying noise. "Can I take a look at that?" he asked, pointing to the cart. Lily hesitated. That cart was her work tool, her means of survival, but there was something in Edward's voice that reassured her. She pushed the cart close to him. Edward examined the wheel carefully. His hands, even trembling, seemed to know what to do. He found some wires in the landfill and, with patience, fixed the axle that was misaligned. When he finished, the wheel turned silently. Lily tested the cart, pushing it back and forth. For the first time in weeks, there wasn't that annoying noise. She looked at Edward with shining eyes, and he saw that she was trying to hold back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," Edward replied. "You saved my life." That night, for the first time, they talked for a longer time. Edward said he couldn't remember much, just fragments that didn't make sense. Lily talked about her life in the landfill, about how she had learned to survive, alone about the other waste pickers who sometimes helped her. "Have you ever had a dream?" Edward asked, looking at the stars shining between the clouds. "Dream," Lily repeated, confused. "Something you'd like to do, to be, when you grow up." Lily was silent for a while. No one had ever asked her that. "I'd like to learn to read properly and maybe have a real house with a roof that doesn't leak when it rains." Edward felt his heart tighten. "And you? Did you have dreams before? Before you forgot?" He closed his eyes, trying to search through the hazy memories. "I think so. But I don't know if they were real dreams or just obligations." On the fourth day, Edward was stronger. He began to help Lily sort the materials, and she was impressed with how quickly he learned the system. He taught little tricks that seemed to come naturally, like folding cardboard more efficiently or identifying plastics that were worth more. "How do you know this?" Lily asked, curious. Edward stopped what he was doing, looking at his own hands. "I don't know. Sometimes things just come out, as if I've always known." It was at this moment that Lily realized that Edward wasn't an ordinary man. There was something in his way of speaking, in his gestures, that indicated he came from a world completely different from hers. But this didn't frighten her. In fact, it made her more curious. During the afternoon, as they worked together, Edward observed Lily with growing admiration. She had a determination and joy that he couldn't understand. Even living in such difficult conditions, she found reasons to smile, to be kind, to care for a stranger. "Lily," he said suddenly, "you're a very special person." She stopped sorting the bottle caps and looked at him. "Special how?" "You have a big heart, bigger than many people. I think I knew before." Lily smiled, but then became serious. "Edward, will you leave when you remember everything?" The question caught Edward off guard. He looked at this girl who had cared for him without asking for anything in return, who had shared her food and her blanket, who had shown more kindness than he could remember receiving in his entire life. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I know that whatever happens, I'll never forget what you did for me." That night, Edward realized that for the first time since he had awakened in that landfill, he didn't want his memories to return. He didn't want to remember who he was before, because that would mean leaving behind the first person who had cared for him without expecting anything in return. Lily, lying on her blanket beside him, thought about his words about dreams. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. A future where perhaps she wouldn't be alone, where someone would care about her. And when she finally fell asleep, it was with a smile on her face, dreaming of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. The first week had passed when Edward began having the dreams. They were confused fragments that woke him in the middle of the night, with his heart racing and his forehead covered in cold sweat. He saw gleaming white corridors, glass rooms where men in suits discussed numbers on enormous boards, and always a voice shouting something about deadlines and transfers. Lily immediately noticed the change. She had grown accustomed to Edward's peaceful breathing during the nights, but now he moved restlessly, whispering words she couldn't understand. On one of these nights, she heard him repeat several times, "The company. I need to save the company." "Edward," she whispered, lightly touching his arm, "you're having a nightmare." He opened his eyes, disoriented, taking a few seconds to recognize where he was. "Lily, I'm sorry. I'm remembering some things." "Do you want to talk about it?" Edward sat up, running his hands over his face. "They're just flashes. I see places, people, but I can't fit the pieces together. It's like trying to put together a puzzle in the dark." It was the next morning when things started to get more complicated. Lily had gone out early to look for materials in a more distant area of the landfill. When she heard the sound of engines approaching, she hid behind a mountain of plastic bags and saw two black cars stopping at the entrance to the landfill. Men in suits got out of the cars, something that definitely wasn't normal in that place. They carried powerful flashlights, even though it was daytime, and walked with determination, as if they knew exactly what they were looking for. Lily felt a chill in her stomach when she realized they were heading in the direction where Edward was hidden. Without thinking twice, she abandoned her cart and ran through the labyrinthine paths of the landfill, taking a shortcut she had discovered days before. She reached Edward breathless, her heart pounding. "There are people looking for you," she said without beating around the bush. "Men in suits with black cars." Edward went pale. Something inside him stirred, a feeling of danger he couldn't explain. "How many?" "4 or 5. They're coming this way." Edward quickly stood up, ignoring his dizziness. "I need to hide." Lily was already thinking ahead. She knew every corner of that landfill, every possible hiding place. "Come with me." She led him to an area where there was a mountain of cloth bags and cardboard stacked up, forming a kind of cave. Edward crouched in the tight space while Lily rearranged the materials to disguise his presence. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "No matter what happens, don't come out of here." The men arrived a few minutes later. Lily pretended to be working normally, sorting bottle caps in a pile near the hiding place. She observed them out of the corner of her eye, noticing how they carefully examined every corner, every top, every possible hiding place. "Hey, kid," one of them called to her. He was tall, with graying hair and a small scar on his chin. "Have you seen any man around here? Someone who shouldn't be in this place?" Lily looked at him with large, innocent eyes. "Man? What kind of man?" "An adult man, well-dressed, possibly injured or confused." "There are only waste pickers here," she replied, turning her attention back to the bottle caps. "And you don't look like waste pickers." The man laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "You're smart, but if you're lying, you could be in trouble." "I don't know anything," Lily insisted, keeping her voice firm despite the fear growing in her chest. The men spent another 20 minutes searching the area. Lily continued working, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. She could hear Edward breathing slowly in the hiding place, trying not to make any noise. Finally, the men moved away, but not before the leader left a card for Lily. "If you see anything, call this number. There's a good reward for anyone who helps us." When the cars finally left, Lily waited another 15 minutes before freeing Edward. He came out of the hiding place trembling, not just from fear, but from something that seemed like recognition. "Do you know them?" Lily asked, seeing the expression on his face. "I think so, but I don't know from where." Edward looked at the card the man had left. "There's no name, just a number. They said you were important." Edward sat on an old box, running his hands through his hair. "Lily, I think I'm in danger, and worse, I think I might be putting you in danger too." "I don't care," she responded. "Immediately. You took care of me when you fixed my cart. I'll take care of you now. You don't understand. These men, they didn't come here to talk. If they find me, then we won't let them find you." The determination in Lily's voice made Edward look at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're very brave for a 9-year-old girl." "When you live on the streets, you learn to be brave or you die," she answered simply. That afternoon, Edward decided to tell Lily about the fragments of memory he had recovered. He talked about his dreams of offices and meetings, about the feeling that there was something important he needed to remember. "I think I was someone important," he said. "Someone other people needed." "And now?" Edward looked at her, at the landfill around them, at the simple life he had discovered there. "Now I don't know what's important anymore." Later, when Lily went out to fetch water, Edward found something that changed everything. Hidden among the belongings she had carefully stored, he found an old, cracked cell phone. When he saw it, his mind was flooded by an avalanche of memories. He remembered buying that phone years ago, remembered important conversations, decisions that affected hundreds of people. And he remembered something else. On the night he had appeared in the landfill, he was running away. Running from something terrible he had discovered, something that put at risk not just his life, but the lives of many other people. With trembling hands, he tried to turn on the device. The battery was almost dead, but it worked long enough to show a message on the screen. "Transfer cancelled. You have until tomorrow to reverse the situation, or everything will be lost." Edward felt his legs weaken. It wasn't just his life that was at stake. There were other people depending on him, people who couldn't even imagine that their fate was in the hands of a man living hidden in a landfill. When Lily returned with the water, she found him pale and trembling. "What happened?" she asked, immediately concerned. Edward looked at her, knowing that his answer would change everything between them. "Lily, I remembered something important, very important, and I think I need to leave here." "Leave?" Her voice came out higher than normal. "Where to?" "To save many people, including you." Lily felt the world collapse around her. She had found someone who cared about her, someone who made her feel less alone, and now he was talking about leaving. "You promised," she whispered. "You promised you wouldn't forget. And I won't forget. Never. But there are things I need to fix, people I need to protect. And me? Who will protect me?" Edward knelt in front of her, holding her small hands. "You'll come with me." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I promise you one thing. When I leave here, you're coming too, and your life will change forever." Lily looked into his eyes and saw something that reassured her. She saw sincerity, but she also saw fear. Edward was scared, not just of the men who were looking for him, but of the weight of responsibility that was returning to his shoulders. "Will you save everyone?" she asked. "I'll try," Edward replied, "but first I need to remember exactly what I need to save them from." That night, Edward could barely sleep. The memories were coming back, clearer and clearer, and with them the urgency of a mission he had almost forgotten. He was Edward Miller, president of one of the largest companies in San Francisco, and he had discovered something that could destroy many innocent lives. But now, looking at Lily sleeping beside him, he realized that his mission had changed. It wasn't just about saving a company or protecting investors. It was about creating a world where girls like Lily didn't have to live in landfills, where her kindness and courage would be recognized and rewarded. Edward closed his eyes, knowing that the next few days would be the most challenging of his life. But for the first time since he had awakened in that landfill, he was certain of what he was fighting for. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. The days that followed were a roller coaster of memories returning bit by bit, like pieces of a puzzle that Edward was desperate to complete. Each fragment that emerged brought with it a new concern, a new responsibility that weighed on his shoulders. Lily noticed the change in him. Edward had become more silent, more thoughtful, spending long hours looking at the horizon with an expression she couldn't decipher. Sometimes she found him talking to himself, repeating numbers and names that meant nothing to her. "Edward," she said one morning, as they sorted materials together, "you're different." He stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "I'm sorry, Lily, I know I'm not being good company." "It's not that. It's just, you seem worried." "Very worried." Edward sighed deeply. He had spent the entire night trying to decide how much he should tell her. Lily deserved to know the truth, but how could he explain to a 9-year-old girl the complexity of the situation he was involved in? "Sit here with me," he said, making space on a cardboard box. "I need to tell you something." Lily sat beside him, her large, attentive eyes. Edward took a deep breath before beginning. "My name is Edward Miller. Before I appeared here, I was the president of a very large company in San Francisco, a company that took care of many people's money." "What kind of money?" "Money that people saved for the future, for when they got old, for when they needed medical help, for their children to study." Edward paused, seeing Lily's concentrated expression. "Imagine that I was taking care of people's dreams." "And what happened?" "I discovered that some people in the company were doing bad things with that money. They were stealing people's dreams." Lily frowned. "And you tried to stop them?" "I tried, but they were very powerful. On the night I appeared here, I was running away. They wanted to stop me from telling the truth." "Is that why those men were looking for you?" Edward nodded. "They work for the bad people. If they find me, they'll stop me from helping all the families who might lose their dreams." Lily was silent for a moment, processing the information. "So you're a hero?" The question caught Edward off guard. "I don't know if I'm a hero. I just want to do the right thing." "And what is the right thing?" "Go back to San Francisco, tell the truth to the right people, save the money that's being stolen." "And after that?" Edward looked at her and for the first time in days smiled. "After that, I'll come back for you, and we'll live in a real house with a roof that doesn't leak when it rains." Lily's eyes sparkled. "You promise?" "I promise." That afternoon, Edward began to plan his departure from the landfill. He knew he couldn't just walk out. The men looking for him were probably still around. But he also knew that with each passing day, more people were at risk of losing their savings. "I need to find a way to get to San Francisco without being seen," he muttered, more to himself than to Lily. "I know a way," she said suddenly. "What do you mean?" "There's a man who comes here sometimes, Mr. Tom. He has an old truck and takes materials to sell in the city. He's a good person." Edward considered the possibility. "Do you think he would help me?" "He likes me. He always gives me some money when I help him load the truck." "When does he come here?" "Every Friday." "Tomorrow is Friday." Edward felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Finally, there was a plan, but it meant he would have to leave Lily behind, at least temporarily. "Lily," he said, holding her hands, "if I manage to solve everything, if I manage to save people's money, I promise I'll come back for you. And if you can't?" The question was simple, but it carried all the fear a child could feel when facing the possibility of being abandoned again. "I will," Edward said, with a determination that surprised even himself. "Because now I have a very important reason to succeed." "What?" "You." That night, Edward couldn't sleep. He lay beside Lily, watching her sleep peacefully, and wondered how it was possible that a 9-year-old girl had changed his perspective on life so profoundly. Before meeting her, his world revolved around numbers, profits, corporate decisions. He had become president of his father's company at 35, and since then his life had been a succession of meetings, reports, and responsibilities that left him increasingly distant from the people who really mattered. He had a wife, Maria, but the marriage had become a partnership of convenience. They lived in the same house but in different worlds. Edward worked 16 hours a day, and Maria occupied herself with social activities that seemed more important to her than her own husband. But there, in that landfill, caring for a girl who had nothing but a generous heart, Edward had rediscovered something he thought he had lost forever, the ability to love without expecting anything in return. The next morning, Tom arrived with his old truck, just as Lily had predicted. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calloused hands, who treated all the waste pickers with respect and dignity. "Tom," Lily called to him, running toward the truck. "I need a favor." "Sure, little one, what do you need?" Lily looked at Edward, who was approaching slowly. "My friend needs to go to San Francisco. It's very important." Tom looked at Edward with curiosity. Even in dirty clothes and with disheveled hair, there was something about Edward that indicated he didn't belong in that place. "What kind of importance?" Tom asked. Edward decided to be honest. "I need to help some people who are in danger, people who could lose everything if I don't act quickly." Tom studied Edward's face for a moment. "Are you in trouble?" "Yes, but not the kind of trouble you might imagine. I'm not a criminal. I'm someone who discovered criminals." "And little Lily?" Edward looked at her, feeling his heart tighten. "She'll stay here until I come back." "No," Tom said, surprising both of them. "If you're in danger, she is too. I'll take you both." "But I don't have money to pay you," Edward protested. Tom smiled. "Lily has already paid me. She's helped me for months, always without asking for anything in return. Now it's my turn to help her." Edward felt his eyes fill with tears. The kindness of these simple people was teaching him lessons that all the business schools in the world hadn't been able to teach. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I am, but you'll have to hide in the back of the truck under the tarp. It'll be uncomfortable." "That's not a problem," Lily said, squeezing Edward's hand. "We'll go together." Edward looked at her, at that brave girl who had saved his life in more ways than one, and knew that regardless of what happened in San Francisco, she had become the most important thing in his life. "Then let's go," he said. "Let's save people's dreams." As they prepared to leave, Edward made a silent promise. No matter what it cost, no matter how many powerful enemies he had to face, he would ensure that Lily never had to live in a landfill again. She deserved much more than that, and he would do everything to give her the life she deserved. The truck pulled away from the landfill with its 2 hidden passengers, carrying with it the hope of a better future and the determination of a man who had learned that the true value of life wasn't in the things he owned, but in the people he chose to protect. The journey to San Francisco lasted 3 hours that seemed eternal. Edward and Lily traveled hidden in the back of the truck, under a tarp that smelled of oil and rubber. Despite the discomfort, Lily seemed fascinated with the adventure, asking whispered questions about the big city she had never seen. "Is it very different from the landfill?" she asked, as the truck swayed around a curve. "Completely different," Edward replied, trying not to think about the brutal contrast between the luxurious world he had left behind and the harsh reality that Lily knew. "There are very tall buildings, beautiful cars, elegantly dressed people. And are all these people happy?" The question caught Edward off guard. He thought about his previous life, the people he knew, the co-workers who seemed to have everything and yet lived unsatisfied. "Not all of them," he answered honestly. "Sometimes people who have a lot still feel empty inside." "And you? Were you happy?" Edward was silent for a moment. "I thought I was, but now I know I wasn't." "And now you are?" Edward looked at her, even in the darkness under the tarp. "Now I know what it means to be happy." When they finally arrived in San Francisco, Tom stopped the truck in a neighborhood, away from downtown. "It's safer here," he explained. "There's less movement, less chance of you being seen." Edward got out of the truck and helped Lily down. She looked around with wide eyes, impressed by the tall buildings and busy streets even in that simpler neighborhood. "It's huge," she whispered. "This is still nothing," Edward said, smiling despite the tension. "Downtown is much bigger." Tom approached them. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Edward hesitated. He couldn't go home. It was probably being watched. He also couldn't go to the company. That would be the first place they'd look for him. But he needed help, and he only knew one person he could completely trust. "I need to find someone," he said. "Someone who can help me." "Who?" "My secretary, Miss Rose. She's worked with me for 15 years. If anyone can help me, it's her." Tom nodded. "Do you know how to get to her?" "I know where she lives. It's about 20 blocks from here." 20 blocks is far to walk," Tom observed, "especially with the girl." Edward looked at Lily, who was clearly tired from the trip. "Can you handle walking a bit?" "I can," she replied, but Edward realized she was trying to be brave. "I'll take you," Tom offered. "Closer than this I can't go, but it's better than nothing." 20 minutes later, Tom left them just 5 blocks from Miss Rose's house. Edward thanked him profusely, promising that one day he would repay his kindness. "Just take good care of each other," Tom said before leaving. "You're a family now." Tom's words echoed in Edward's mind as he and Lily walked down the streets. A family. That's what they had become in an unexpected and pure way. Rose's house was small and simple, on a quiet street in a middle-class neighborhood. Edward hesitated in front of the gate, suddenly nervous. How to explain his appearance? After 2 weeks of absence, how to explain Lily? "Are you afraid?" Lily asked, noticing his hesitation. "A little," Edward admitted. "It's been 2 weeks since I disappeared. A lot could have changed." "But you said she's your friend." "She is. Ms. Rose is. She's like a mother to me. She took care of me at the company, supported me when I needed it. Then she'll help you." Edward smiled, impressed by Lily's simple wisdom. "You're right." He rang the doorbell, and after a few minutes, he heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and Miss Rose appeared with her grey hair and reading glasses hanging around her neck. When she saw Edward, her expression went through a series of emotions: surprise, relief, concern, and finally, Tears. "Edward!" she exclaimed, opening her arms. "My God, where have you been? The whole city is looking for you." Edward let himself be hugged, feeling for the first time in weeks the sensation of being safe. "Ms. Rose, I can explain everything. But first, I need to introduce someone very special." He stepped back and pulled Lily forward. "This is Lily. She saved my life." Miss Rose looked at the girl, immediately noticing her dirty clothes and malnourished appearance. But what caught her attention most was the sparkle in Lily's eyes and the way she held Edward's hand. "Hello, dear," she said gently, kneeling to be at the girl's height. "Welcome." "Thank you," Lily responded shyly. "You two come in immediately," Ms. Rose said, looking around the street. "It's not safe to be outside." Inside the house, Edward told Ms. Rose everything. His discovery of the corruption scheme in the company, his attempt to stop those responsible, the attack he suffered, and how Lily had found him and taken care of him. "I knew something was wrong," Ms. Rose said, shaking her head. "After you disappeared, Robert temporarily assumed the presidency. He said you had gone on an urgent business trip, but I never believed it." "Robert is involved?" "Up to his neck. Him and 3 other directors. They're transferring the employees' pension fund to ghost accounts." Edward felt his blood boil. "How much?" $80 million, the money of almost 5,000 families. "We have to stop this." "How?" "You're officially missing. They got a court order to transfer all powers to Robert." Edward stood up, pacing nervously around the small living room. "There has to be a way. There has to be." Lily, who had been quiet during the entire conversation, suddenly spoke. "What if we told everyone?" The adults looked at her, confused. "What do you mean, dear?" Ms. Rose asked. "My neighbor at the landfill, Sebastian, he always said that when powerful people do bad things, we have to tell everyone. He said newspapers like to know about these things." Edward stopped walking, looking at Lily with admiration. "You're a genius, Lily." "I am." "The press. Of course, if I can't use official channels, I can use the press." "Ms." Rose nodded slowly. "Melanie Davis from the Chronicle. She's always been fair in her articles about the company." "Do you have her contact?" "I do. But Edward, do you have proof?" Edward thought for a moment. "I have access to the company's systems. I know where to find the evidence. But how will we get into the company? It's being watched." "I know a way," Edward said, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "But it will be risky." "I'm going with you," Lily said immediately. "No, Lily, it's too dangerous. You said we're a family. Families stick together." Edward looked at her. Seeing the determination in her eyes, he knew he wouldn't be able to convince her to stay behind. "All right," he said. "But you do exactly what I say when I say it." "I promise." Ms. Rose watched them, seeing the special connection between them. "You really are a family," she murmured. "We are," Edward confirmed. "And now we're going to save the dreams of 5,000 other families." That night, Edward called Melanie Davis. The conversation was short and direct. He had a story that could bring down one of the biggest corporate scandals of the year, but he needed protection and press coverage. "I can meet you tomorrow at 6 in the morning," Melanie said. "But Edward, are you sure you want to do this? These people are dangerous." Edward looked at Lily, who was sleeping on Ms. Rose's couch, covered by a clean, soft blanket. "I'm sure," he answered. "I have every reason in the world to do this." When he hung up the phone, Edward realized he was about to face the biggest challenge of his life. But for the first time, he wasn't doing it just for money or abstract principles. He was doing it for Lily, for all the children like her who deserved a better world. It was time to prove that the kindness and courage of a 9-year-old girl could change the world. Dawn broke gray in San Francisco, with a light drizzle that seemed to bless Edward and Lily's plans. They met with Melanie Davis in a small, discreet cafe, far from the curious eyes of downtown. Melanie was an experienced journalist, with brown hair tied in a bun and eyes that conveyed intelligence and determination. When she saw Edward and Lily entering the cafe, she immediately realized there was a much deeper story than she had imagined. "Edward," she said, standing up to greet him. "Are you okay? The entire city is speculating about your disappearance." "I'm fine, thanks to her," Edward replied, placing his hand on Lily's shoulder. "Melanie, this is Lily. She's the reason I'm here today." Melanie looked at the girl with curiosity. Lily was clean and wearing clothes borrowed from Ms. Rose, but there was still something in her eyes that indicated she had seen more than any child should see. "Pleased to meet you, Lily," Melanie said gently. "Edward told me you're very special." "She is," Edward confirmed. "She taught me that sometimes the most important things in life don't cost anything." During the next hour, Edward told Melanie the whole story. The discovery of the corruption scheme, his attempt to stop those responsible, the attack he suffered, and how Lily had saved him in the Oakland landfill. "Do you have proof?" Melanie asked, taking notes quickly. "I have access to the company's systems. I can get all the documents you need." "But how will we get into the company?" Edward smiled, a smile that Lily knew well. It was the smile he made when he had a brilliant idea. "We'll go in through the front door," he said. "Today is Saturday. The company is practically empty, just basic security, and I still have my access card." "But it's risky," Melanie observed. "Everything worth doing is risky," Edward replied, looking at Lily. "Isn't it, little one?" "It is," she nodded. "But you said we stick together." "We will, always." 2 hours later, the three of them were in front of the corporate building where Edward had worked for so many years. It was an imposing building made of glass and steel that rose like a monument to financial power. "Wow," Lily whispered, looking up. "It's very tall." 40 floors, Edward said. "I worked on the top floor." "You were the boss of everyone?" "I was, and I will be again." They entered through the parking garage using Edward's access card. Surprisingly, it still worked. In the elevator, Edward explained the plan to Lily. "You'll stay with Melanie in the waiting room. I'll go to my office, copy all the documents we need, and then we'll leave. And if someone comes, you press this button," Edward said, showing the emergency button on the elevator. "It will make a lot of noise, and I'll know there's a problem." When they reached the top floor, Edward felt a wave of nostalgia. This had been his world for so many years, but now it seemed cold and lifeless. "Stay here with Melanie," he said to Lily. "I'll be back in 10 minutes." Edward entered his office, turned on the computer, and began downloading all the relevant files. Spreadsheets, emails, reports, everything that proved the corruption scheme. His fingers flew over the keyboard, and he felt like a spy in his own company. That's when he heard the noise. It was the elevator emergency alarm, strident and desperate. Edward felt his heart race. Someone had arrived. He quickly saved the files on a flash drive and left the office. When he reached the waiting room, he saw Melanie protecting Lily behind a desk, while 2 men in suits, the same ones who had searched for him in the landfill, approached. "Edward Miller," the leader said, "the same man with the scar on his chin. You've caused us a lot of trouble." "Leave them alone," Edward said, placing himself between the men and Lily. "I'm the one you want." "You're right, but now you have company. This complicates things." "It doesn't complicate anything. I'll go with you, but let them leave." It was then that Lily did something no one expected. She came out from behind the desk and stood beside Edward. "No," she said, with a courage that surprised everyone present. "I won't let you hurt my dad." Edward felt his eyes fill with tears. Lily had called him Dad. For the first time in his life, someone had chosen him, not for what he had, but for who he was. "Lily," he whispered, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "Family sticks together. You taught me that." The man with the scar looked confused. "She's your daughter?" "Yes," Edward replied without hesitation. "She's my daughter. Then you'll come, together." It was at that moment that Melanie shouted, "Now!" Suddenly the elevator doors opened and a team of police officers entered the room. Melanie had called the police while Edward was copying the files. "FBI," the agent in charge shouted, "everyone on the ground." The confusion that followed lasted only a few minutes. The men in suits were arrested, and Edward finally felt safe, for the first time in weeks. "Edward," the agent approached, Are you okay?" "I am," Edward replied, hugging Lily. "We are. We have the evidence you collected. This will be enough to arrest all those involved." In the weeks that followed, the scandal dominated all the newspapers. Robert and his accomplices were arrested, the money was returned to the pension fund, and Edward was reinstated as president of the company. But the biggest change wasn't professional. Edward initiated the legal processes to officially adopt Lily. He bought a large house with a garden where she could play and a room just for her, with a real bed and toys she had never imagined having. "Are you happy?" Edward asked one afternoon as he watched Lily playing in the garden. "Very," she replied, running to hug him, "but sometimes I remember the landfill." "And does that make you sad?" "No, it makes me grateful, because that's where I found you." Edward smiled, hugging his daughter. "That's also where I found myself." 6 months later, Edward and Lily returned to the Oakland landfill, but this time not as residents. They had created a foundation to help children in vulnerable situations, offering education, housing, and opportunities. "Everything has changed," Lily observed, seeing the improvements that had been implemented. "Not everything," Edward said, pointing to Tom, who was helping coordinate the distribution of food. "Good people continue to be good." "And the bad people?" "Some have changed. Others have learned that it doesn't pay to be bad." Lily looked at her adoptive father, the man she had found lost among the trash and who had become the center of her life. "Dad," she said, using the word that still made her emotional, "thank you for letting me save you." Edward laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed through the place where everything had begun. "Thank you, my daughter. Thank you for teaching me that the greatest treasures in life don't cost anything." When the sun set over Oakland that afternoon, Edward and Lily went home hand in hand, knowing they had found in each other the family they had